Christmas in Los Angeles has a vibe you really don't find anywhere else. You see palm trees wrapped in twinkling lights, families cruising across town with trunks full of gifts, and you hear holiday music floating out of open windows into the soft glow of the morning. It's usually that one time of year when the city finally takes a breath, a rare moment of peace in a place that usually never slows down. But this Christmas morning, the atmosphere shifted. The clouds dropped lower, the air got strangely heavy, and the wind changed. It didn't feel like a normal breeze anymore. It felt focused, organized, and almost alive. In just a few minutes, people went from curious to terrified. It started with the small things. Holiday decorations started shaking, leaves began spinning in tight little circles on the pavement, and trash cans were sliding across driveways without anyone touching them. And then came the noise. It was that deep, rolling roar that folks in Tornado Alley know all too well, but it's a sound Angelenos almost never hear. It didn't sound like wind. It sounded like a freight train picking up speed, headed straight for a neighborhood full of families still in their pajamas, opening presents and making breakfast. Phones came out, cameras started rolling, and people were shouting to get away from the windows. In a city that is famous for earthquakes, wildfires, traffic, and Hollywood movies, something completely alien was happening. A real-life tornado was forming over Los Angeles on Christmas Day. So, how did a peaceful holiday morning turn into a scene of spinning debris and shattered glass? How does a tornado even happen in Southern California? And what does a shock event like this tell us about the weird shifts we are seeing in weather patterns across the United States? Let's zero in on exactly what happened that Christmas morning when the sky above Boyle Heights suddenly turned violent. It was a situation that caught everyone off guard. Usually, waking up on Christmas in Los Angeles feels like a scene from a movie. It's the one time of year the city actually hits the brakes. The freeways are empty, coffee spots open late, and families are just relaxing at home with the smell of breakfast in the air. You don't get snow, obviously, just palm trees swaying in the breeze. But the feeling is the same. It's warm, peaceful, and full of tradition. That is exactly why what happened next felt so impossible. As the morning rolled on, people started picking up on a weird vibe in the air. The clouds got thick and the sky turned a shade of dark gray you rarely see here. The wind didn't just blow. It felt strangely warm and started coming in sharp gusts. You had this eerie mix of sounds, holiday music and laughter inside, fighting against the rising roar of the wind outside. The shift from a peaceful holiday to a dangerous storm didn't happen all at once. Crept in. Curtains started moving even with the windows shut. Decorations on the porch began to rattle. When people stepped outside expecting a little rain, they were hit with heavy, pressurized air that felt like it was pushing against them. Now, if you live in a place like Kansas or Oklahoma, you know exactly what that feels like. But in Los Angeles, it was just confusing. Residents looked up and didn't just see drifting clouds. They saw the sky literally swirling. That was the moment curiosity turned into real worry. Families stopped their celebrations. Kids abandoned their new toys to stare out the window. Parents muted the TV because the noise outside was suddenly demanding their attention. It was still Christmas, but something dangerous was quietly building right over the neighborhoods of East LA. Before anyone even said the word tornado, the warning signs were already there. People noticed the low clouds dragging right across the rooftops, signaling that something very unusual was brewing. The wind didn't just blow, it was erratic. Flags would snap hard in one direction and then instantly whip back the other way. Leaves were spinning in tight little circles on the sidewalk like miniature whirlwinds. In the front yards, the Christmas displays took a beating. Inflatable Santas and plastic reindeer started swaying and tilting as the gusts became sharper and more focused. What started as simple curiosity quickly turned into a real sense of unease because these strange patterns weren't passing by. They were getting more intense. And then, the sound arrived. At first, people thought it was just the distant rumble of heavy traffic on the freeway. But it kept getting louder, deeper, and more constant. A rolling roar that didn't fade out between gusts. Residents later said it was that exact sound you hear Midwesterners warn about, like a freight train barreling straight toward your house. Security cameras started catching the chaos as small debris lifted off the ground and began spiraling upward. People who had stepped outside to film the weird sky suddenly turned around and rushed back indoors, yelling for their families to get away from the windows. On the street, parked cars were rocking on their suspension, their alarms blaring from the pressure change. Power lines were whistling high above. Dust and leaves were being sucked down the road in spirals, as if something invisible was pulling everything into motion. Even without any official sirens blaring across the city, the message was obvious to anyone watching. This was no longer just a windstorm. Something organized and powerful was forming right over the neighborhood. And in just a few moments, the whispers between neighbors became reality. A tornado was actually on the ground in Los Angeles on Christmas morning. The National Weather Service wasted no time. As videos and damage reports flooded in, they reviewed the radar signatures and sent a survey team straight into the neighborhood. By the time they finished their assessment, there was zero doubt left. They officially confirmed a tornado had touched down. It was rated an EF0 on the enhanced Fujita scale. Now, while that is the lowest category, it is still serious. We are talking about winds between 65 and 85 miles per hour. The team mapped the path touching down right near Ruben Salazar Park, cutting northeast through Boyle Heights before lifting back up minutes later. In total, it carved a path roughly a quarter-mile long and about 100 feet wide. That official report turned a weird weather story into a documented historical event for one of America's biggest cities. Now, for the residents on the ground, the specific rating didn't matter nearly as much as the experience itself. They had watched shingles get ripped off roofs, windows shatter, and heavy metal signs twist up like scrap paper. But the science did answer the one question everybody was asking: how on earth does this happen in Los Angeles? Meteorologists explained that a powerful winter storm system had parked itself over Southern California for days. It brought a combination of deep Pacific moisture, unstable air, and strong wind shear. Those are the exact ingredients you need to spin up a tornado, even when you are thousands of miles away from Tornado Alley. These aren't the massive, long-track monsters that level towns in the Midwest, but they are short-lived urban tornadoes that cause real damage and real fear. Once the news broke, the disbelief vanished. The headlines ran and social media exploded. A city that is used to talking about earthquakes and wildfires suddenly had a new phrase trending right alongside the holiday photos: Christmas tornado in Los Angeles. When the storm finally cleared out, we could break the damage down into clear categories, which really shows how much chaos a small tornado can cause. First and most emotional were the homes. Roof shingles were stripped clean, rain gutters were twisted, and wooden fences were splintered. Some houses even had sections of their roofs peeled back, exposing the insulation and framing. Windows were cracked or blown out completely, leaving living rooms covered in glass and soaked by the rain. And all those Christmas decorations that had been carefully set up the night before, they were scattered across lawns and rooftops. The second category was small businesses, the heartbeat of the neighborhood. Storefront signs were bent or torn down, and lighted marquees were smashed. Restaurants and corner markets had their windows blown out, forcing owners to spend their holiday boarding them up with plywood. For a lot of these family-run shops, Christmas week is supposed to bring steady income, but instead, they were facing cleanup costs. Next, the infrastructure and trees took a hit. Large branches snapped off and blocked the streets, while whole trees were uprooted, ripped right out of the wet soil. Traffic lights were left swinging, and in some spots, utility poles were leaning at dangerous angles. Broken branches tangled in the power lines caused outages and safety scares until the crews could arrive. And finally, the vehicles. Cars parked on the street took a beating from flying debris, ending up with dented hoods, broken mirrors, and shattered windshields. And if a car was unlucky enough to be parked under a tree, it likely ended up crushed by falling limbs. When residents stepped outside, they found their vehicles buried under branches, shingles, and scrap metal that had been blown in from blocks away. The path of destruction was narrow, but inside that corridor, the impact was undeniable. A normal windy day just scatters some leaves around. A tornado completely rearranges a neighborhood. And in Boyle Heights, the damage left a clear signature of rotating winds cutting a path straight through the community. In the hours that followed, The most powerful part of this story didn't come from the radar maps or the official reports. It came from the people who actually lived through it. The voices from the community painted the clearest picture. One resident said the roar didn't just feel like it was coming from outside. It felt like the sound was vibrating inside the walls themselves. Another person described the moment the storm passed as the scariest silence I have ever heard. A silence broken only by the sound of car alarms going off and dogs barking in the distance. Parents talked about grabbing their kids and huddling in bathrooms or hallways, trying to follow tornado safety tips they had only ever seen on TV. Some admitted they honestly didn't know where the safest spot in their house was, because tornadoes are something you associate with Oklahoma, Texas, or Kansas, not Los Angeles. The kids described it differently. Many said it felt like a scene from a movie, except this time it was happening on their own street. One teenager was actually recording the storm on his phone until he saw debris flying toward him. That's when he dropped the camera and ran for cover. But the moment the wind died down, the neighbors checked on each other. People were calling out across the street, just asking if everyone was okay. Within minutes, groups were outside clearing branches, boarding up broken windows, and tying tarps over damaged roofs. Even though it was Christmas Day, the mood shifted instantly from celebration to community action. There was fear, yes, but there was also a lot of gratitude. Over and over again, residents repeated the same line: "We lost things, but we didn't lose people." Remarkably, there were no injuries and no deaths, which is a miracle considering how suddenly the storm arrived. As the community cleaned up debris under streets that were still lined with Christmas lights, Boyle Heights showed something stronger than any tornado: resilience, connection, and that unmistakable instinct Americans have to help one another when disaster strikes. The Christmas tornado in Los Angeles will be remembered long after the broken branches are cleared and the roofs are repaired. It wasn't just a weather event. It was a stark reminder that nature doesn't check the calendar. It can rewrite any day, even the most joyful one of the year. The people of Boyle Heights woke up expecting Christmas carols, family meals, and quiet streets. Instead, they witnessed roaring winds and spinning debris, living through a story they will likely tell for the rest of their lives. Yet, right in the middle of that chaos, something powerful stood out. People helped each other. They checked on their neighbors. They proved, once again, just how strong a community can be when the unexpected strikes. Events like this raise bigger questions, too. While tornadoes are rare in Los Angeles, we know now that they aren't impossible. Extreme weather is becoming a part of the national conversation from coast to coast. It shows why it is so critical to stay informed, to respect weather alerts, and to know exactly where to take shelter when every minute counts. This storm may have been brief, but the lesson is lasting. Be prepared, no matter where you live. If you found this story meaningful or informative, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with friends and family who track extreme weather across the United States. Your support is what allows us to keep covering these real events, real communities, and stories of resilience. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever experienced a tornado or a severe storm where you live? Do you think Southern California is going to see more of these events in the future? And be honest, if a tornado formed in your neighborhood on Christmas morning, what is the first thing you would do? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And as always, stay safe, stay prepared, and stay weather aware.